welcome to the Stockboy Gaming channel, where today we're testing out 4 awesome rear-wheel drive sports cars in this game. It's ZR350 versus RT3000 versus Coquette versus the Jester Classic, and we're testing for everything you see on your screen there. Hopefully by the end of this video you'll find yourself asking, why are some of these cars not in the tuners class? There's some pretty solid balance here. This is going to be a lot of fun. We've got one of each engine type, and we're starting at La Puerta Dragway with the ZR350 on the left versus the RT3000 on the right. It's rotary versus inline four, and we're going to the 8th mile line first. The ZR350 just barely edges the RT3000. Can the RT3000 claw its way back at the quarter mile? It's not going to there. The ZR350 is still just barely faster, but we're going to the half-mile line. That's what we do here. That RT3000 is giving it everything it's got. It's not quite going to catch the ZR350, but it's so close. I mean, it closed the gap even a little bit. Those two cars are pretty well balanced as far as acceleration goes, but now we're doing Supra versus Corvette, or in the game's terms, Jester Classic versus the original Coquette, one of the original cars in this game. We're going to see which one of these is quicker. It's inline 6 versus V8, one of each engine type. It's going to be a fun little video here. You can see the Jester Classic does beat the Coquette to that 8th mile line and the quarter mile line. Is the Coquette going to be able to gain some speed as we're going down to this half mile? Because it's getting embarrassed a little bit so far by that Supra, but oh, that black Jester Classic is going to extend the lead even further. So now we've got our little final round for this first test we're doing for acceleration, and we've got Supra versus RX-7. This is an awesome little battle. We're going to see which one can get to the 8th mile, quarter mile, and half mile line first. It looks like the Jester Classic jumps out to a slight lead off the start, and it does. The ZR350 looked really strong against the RT3000, but it's not going to catch up at the quarter mile line. And this Jester is going to keep pulling away all the way to the half mile. That Jester Classic is really quick compared to these cars, and you're going to see that here on this screen. We've got real drag times for you, and you can see that only the Jester Classic can get to the 8th mile in under 7 seconds. The other cars may not look that impressive, but everything is in the 11s. For this game, that's pretty quick. When we've been looking at these HSW cars recently, that may not look like much, but these are pretty fun, and those times would fit in pretty well in the tuners class. Now we want to see top speed. I'm measuring that as an average speed around an entire lap of my giant Custom Speedway. It's about 1.5 miles long. I'm not going to make you watch every car do its hot lap. Instead, we just kind of flip back and forth. We know this Jester Classic was fastest at the drag strip, but will it be fastest here as far as top speed goes? Or maybe something like the RT3000. I know based on testing I've done so far with these tuners after they've been nerfed, this thing wasn't nerfed quite as hard as some of the other ones. So maybe we'll see a surprise from the RT3000, or maybe the original Coquette's going to have something to say about it. This car is actually pretty quick. So each one of these cars is here for a reason. Stick around to the end. You're going to want to see the end result. I have a Forza style score if you're not familiar with it, that'll tell you overall performance for each car. And as you can see here, Jester Classic might have won that first test, but the Coquette, which was second, I think, yeah, it was second in the drag, is now the top car as far as speed goes. And by quite a bit. I mean, some of these top speeds are pretty embarrassing. You're looking at 119 miles an hour. It's a little disappointing. But we're not done testing. That's why we have all 3 tests, and we're going to my test track. It's a fairly technical place where we want to put it all together, see just how good these cars are up against each other. And once again, we're going with Supra versus RX-7. I love this video, and I picked these cars because each one does have a different engine type in real life. So you've got your rotary on the bottom, your i6 on the top, and they are so close coming up to that first gantry. Going up through this section here, it tends to favor cars that have a little bit more power. So you would expect the Jester Classic to pull ahead, and it does. But this ZR350 isn't that far off as far as acceleration goes. So I want to see that thing crawl its way back into this race. We've got that Jester Classic just hugging the bottom line though. It actually handles really well. It has a really good rotation. The ZR350 actually kind of understeers a little bit. If you hit a bump, it tends to straighten out, which doesn't really help you out a lot at my test track. And you can see here as we go to this final gantry, there is a pretty decent lead for that Jester Classic heading down the home stretch here. The ZR350 is not quite going to catch it, but that Jester Classic is really quick, and you can see the gap there. They're not really all that close as far as handling goes. It's not looking great for the RX-7 or ZR350. Now though, we want to put this RT3000 up against the original Coquette, so we've got S2000 Honda versus Corvette V8 versus i4. And look at that RT3000 to that first gantry. It just blows the Corvette away. We're now going to look at a couple of sectors here. Their power might matter a little bit more. The Coquette kind of closing the gap, so that RT3000 actually handles pretty well. And we're going through that hairpin, a long sweeping corner here. We're gonna see which one gets to the reverse start finish line first. It's gonna be pretty close. You can see the Coquette is starting to narrow the gap a little bit. So now the RT3000 is just hanging on for dear life. They're even going into this final chicane section. That's a really tight couple of corners. And then a really long sweeping banked turn going up to the final stretch. The Coquette is starting to close the gap even more. So now we've got a drag race. Which one of these guys is going to get to that line first? The RT3000 giving it everything it's got, and it's just barely going to edge out the Coquette on my test track. That's a pretty close race. That's about as close as they get. But now we want to see, how does this thing do against the Jester? We saw the Jester just annihilate the ZR350. The RT3000 is looking good after that test against the Coquette, so let's see how it can handle it. S2000 versus Supra. Which one you got going to this first gantry? They are tied. I mean, I can't really tell much of a difference there. They are basically tied exactly. These two cars both handle pretty well. The Jester is just kind of on another level when it comes to handling, but that RT3000 surprised me. It's tied going up to the second gantry. And now as we go through this section here, that long sweeping corner kind of tends to favor cars with power as long as they don't understeer. And that Jester Classic definitely does not understeer. We're starting to see the acceleration take over a bit. So really what I'm seeing here is that the RT3000 handles really well. Just about as well as the Jester Classic. But you can see once we get to the areas where acceleration starts to matter more, the Jester Classic is pulling ahead. And we know the RT3000 isn't as fast in a straight line, but that gap is really not that bad. So these cars, not a whole lot separating them at my test track. And you can see here, Jester Classic comes out on top again, but that RT3000 is looking good. The Coquette a little bit slower than I would have expected, but that ZR350 is just miserable. And when we're looking at the speed score here, that kind of ZR350 not being fast enough extends to this. It's not good at anything, and it really bothers me. It drives me insane. But what can you do? I don't know. Rockstar, if you want cars to have more balance, I'm available for work. Just let me know. Anyways, the Coquette is still really good. For being as old as it is, it's an 8-year-old car in the game. It's actually a really solid car, and we've seen it here in the testing. I think it would fit in really well with the tuners too, because that speed score that we saw actually puts it right up there with some of the top ones from my last video where I had the Sultan RS Classic and the Elegee Retro and the Calico. It would fit in pretty well. ZR350 is such a disappointment. Really, that Jester Classic 2 would fit in pretty well with the tuners and kind of in between the top and bottom tier of tuners. I just really hope we can start to see some more balance, maybe with this How Special Works update. Get some of these cars in the same class, give them some house upgrades, and make them fairly even to where we can race without just having the same car in every single race. Get on it, Rockstar. It's time. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments too. I'd love to hear from you down there. I hope to see you next time.